Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Arbino. I'm the head of collection development for the Benson Latin American Collection at the University of Texas at Austin. There in my role, I do collection development specifically for US Latinx studies as well as the Andean region. And I know most of us are working remotely right now, so I thought what I would do today is introduce a digital exhibit that I've been working on for a few months. It's focused on US Latinx Zines and the intersection with food studies. So the exhibit, I did it with Omeka, which is a great platform for doing digital exhibits. And I call it You Are What You Do Not Eat, Decolonial Resistance in US Latinx Zines. Before we jump into it, I just want to talk a little bit about the zine collection at the Benson. This is something that I started in 2017 when I first began there. And, you know, it was a way for me to sort of put my own stamp on the collection. My predecessor had been there well over 2 decades and curated such a wonderful collection for US Latinx resources. And I continue to sustain and evolve that collection, but the zines were an opportunity for me to sort of create my own niche within the collection. They also include graphic novels, but by and large zines, and we have over 250 of them since I started. And I'll only show you about 10 of them today, the ones, you know, mostly related to food studies and sort of offshoots, thematic offshoots of food studies. But you should absolutely come to the Benson once we reopen, whether you're faculty, student, general public. These materials are available for you to access for free, and we would love for you to come in and check them out. So the majority of these zines, I guess I should say, have been bought, you know, a lot of them online through Etsy. That has allowed us to have zine representation from like Washington, DC and California. And then we've done some local purchasing trips to, of course, here in Austin, San Antonio, Albuquerque, and New York. And so we continue to grow the collection and try to diversify it as much as we can with the focus on US Latinx zine creators. Before we get started, I also just want to give a thanks. You know, the collection, I'll share my screen in just a moment and you'll be able to see that on the Omeka exhibit, I did the text, but there was a whole big team that went into scanning the materials, creating the metadata for the zines, and helping, you know, training me on how to use Omeka. And so I'm thankful to my colleagues at UT Libraries and at Lilas Benson for their help with this matter. And, you know, it was a great project. I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Perfect. And we're going to enlarge this. We're going to go to the introduction, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize myself for now. So, you know, this is the introductory page about the exhibit and just focuses on the intersection of Latinx studies and food studies and the need to think about zines at an academic level. That's something that I'm really interested in because, you know, these are a lot of fun to read. They're really great. They're these do-it-yourself publications that, you know, sort of offer unfettered access into the creator's mind and the creator's perspectives. And I think that's a really necessary thing to have, because when you start incorporating with some publishing houses, you start incorporating editors that are taking stuff out, asking you to add stuff in. So what the do-it-yourself publications like zines and certain graphic novels allow is for the reader to have that unfiltered access, right? That access to the creator. And I think that offers a lot of unique perspectives. A lot of the themes that we have in our zines tend to be about identity, so gender, sexuality, race, place, home. Gentrification has really come up a lot in the last few years, nation, and then reflecting on different periods of one's life, such as childhood or adolescence or adulthood. And so I also want to highlight here, I mentioned that you folks could come access these materials. You would be able to do that at the Rare Books and Manuscripts Room at the Benson Latin American Collection. So just come on in and we'll get you set up. Beyond that, you know, I did want to say we're going to be focusing on food over the next few minutes and a few of its offshoots. But, you know, I think you could come to the Benson and look at this collection and put together a whole bunch of other themes that would lead to some serious academic work. So if you want to come just to enjoy them, because they're super entertaining and they're great, please do. But please, keep in mind that these can be and should be read also at an academic level as well. Let's see. So let me go into introduction here. And we're going to start with this beautiful image of the cover of the La Horchata zine. This is out of Washington, D.C. and focuses specifically on Central American identities in the U.S. And I just think it's a very striking cover that I wanted to use for the beginning of this exhibit. And, so I give a pretty wordy introduction here that essentially starts in 1492 because I'm interested in the way that colonialism impacts food studies, and the legacies of colonialism still impact food and identity today. And you might think, well, does it? And my answer is, yeah, it does. If you think about, for instance, when the Spaniards first began colonizing what is current day Mexico, they outlawed amaranth. Now, amaranth was a super important staple crop for indigenous groups in Mesoamerica, also used in ceremony. And so when the Europeans outlawed it and banned it, that changed their dietary, their diets considerably. And this continues to happen. When Christopher Columbus brings sugarcane to the Caribbean and it blows up and turns, the entire Caribbean into essentially a plantation society, then you start having, other crops fall by the wayside as a sort of monocrop develops there. And that changes the way people eat and the way people have relationships with food and crops and agriculture. So, for me, colonialism has a huge impact in the way that we even continue to eat today. And you could probably point to some neo-colonial type stuff like these corporations like Monsanto that corner the market on corn, for instance, and reduce all of the different varieties of corn to about, a handful of different varieties. And again, that changes the way people interact with their corn at a local and a global level. So it starts with 1492, and I move through. I try to get us up to present day and more or less do that. So beyond that, let's head into, I did want to acknowledge one thing here. The other thing that I want to say in this part of the exhibit, as we go through this sort of tour here, is that one thing to keep in mind is assimilation. So we think of assimilation's primary definition often, the social process of absorbing one cultural group into harmony with another. But I think there's a really secondary definition that's really great. For me, was introduced to me by Frantz Fanon, the great post-colonial thinker. And it is the process of absorbing nutrients into the body after digestion. And so the secondary definition, which is kind of more specific to food, really reconsiders that adage of you are what you eat and what you do not eat. Or in other words, if you start straying away from the food of your culture, you, in theory, become removed from your culture, right? And if you start assimilating the food of another culture, you become more tied to that culture. Ideas like that. So let's jump into this section on cultural loss, food colonization. And for me, the starting point for this was thinking about the book, the novel, Les Mi Última, by the great New Mexican author Rudolfo Anaya. And he has this really pivotal scene where the main character, Antonio, who's a Nuevo Mexicano living in rural New Mexico, he goes to school for the first time. And for lunch, he brings a tortilla with green chile in it. And the whole class laughs at him because they all have sandwiches. And so this automatically creates a moment of tension for him. In the future, will he continue to come to school, the symbol of institutionalized power? And will he come to school with a tortilla with green chile and be sort of alienated and isolated for doing that? Or will he join his classmates and start eating sandwiches, but at the same time alienate himself from his traditional food. So that came up, that idea resonated with me when reading this wonderful piece from the zine Comida con Cuidado. This piece is written by Yulisa Yosavite and called Querida Mamita. And again, it's kind of about how the family was forced to move away from their traditional diet and how this gave them a sense of cultural loss and led to dietary problems later on through the abundance of overprocessed food. And so it becomes specifically this access to sugary food that leads to the family's health concerns. And so, you know, it ends something like, I don't want to die of diabetes like you did, mamita. If I keep eating like I have been taught to, I surely will. So this removal from their original, the fruit of their cultural heritage has greatly affected them. And I think that that is a legacy of colonialism, like sort of moving towards food that's available, that's overprocessed and therefore more affordable, and the cost of that. So let's just jump into cultural identity and resistance. So this is a really great piece called Self-Reconstructed by Ofelia Faz Garza, and it appears in an issue of Santa Sucia. And, you know, in the previous example, I mentioned that Yosavite expresses her disconnect from her culture, but for Faz Garza, I think her piece shows that food and cultural identity are inextricably linked, so that her diet helps her to resist assimilation. So, you know, F as in familia, that's bold like mole. F as in frijoles, aguadito, sizzling in fresh rendered manteca. F as in a fideo de conchitas. F as in flautas or taquitos. So here, like, food articulates her identity, that she is Ofelia with an F, not Ophelia with a PH. And it spills over into a larger commentary on resistance. And that's what really interests me here. F as in F those who talk about making this country and old neighborhoods great again. So what starts with food ends with something broader, right? But still articulating a sense of resistance. I also want to bring in a bit more visually appealing pieces that don't require too much interpretation or too much reading. And so we have this really great piece of by Mary Agnes Rodriguez in Yes Ma'am's Vegan issue of the person holding corn. And then a bit more tongue-in-cheek here is by Mercado Merch, Más Americanos. And, you know, I think it's really great to play off words like masa being both for the mass, you know, for the masses, and also dough. And then you have this idea of 100% gluten-free, which is, you know, to say corn is very healthy for you and you can eat it without any concerns. So, you know, corn to me is such a really wonderful crop. It's something that is native to the Americas and was one of the three main crops for indigenous sustenance, along with beans and squash. And so we continue to this day to value corn in different cuisines throughout the Americas. But, you know, specifically, if I'm thinking of US Latino cuisine, we might think of something like, well, tortillas, of course. Menudo uses a corn hominy. A cup of elote, obviously. Atole, too. So, you know, just a number of stuff that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I ended this piece with Yeri Guevara's Growing Up Salvadoran, because it places a really great emphasis on family and food. The family assembly line it took to make tamales and to stir the masa until your arms fall off. So I'm really interested in how food can lead to a sense of family networks or kinship networks or community networks, and also how it can lead to like reconnecting with ancestral ideas and potentially the possibility for storytelling. So I think some of those boxes are definitely checked on this page. And let's jump forward to plant forward perspectives. So what really interested me here was a return to traditional knowledge in response to the overdependence of the health institution in the United States. I'm certainly not telling you that the suggestions made here can replace the knowledge or work of a doctor, but I am interested in groups that offer their own worldviews, their own perspectives, and their own relationships with plants and animals as ways of promoting well-being. And I think that a really great example of this is in, let's see, a tale and interview with my grandfather by Vivi Moreno for La Hierbera Zine by La Liga. And here, if you just jump down a little bit, you'll see, for instance, what plants and medicinal techniques do you use to treat or cure yourself and your loved ones? So here you have a granddaughter interviewing her grandfather to reconnect, again, thinking about ancestry knowledge and traditional knowledge. And building those kinship networks. And he gives, great sort of homeopathic ideas. Mint tea can be used to treat chest-related illnesses and stomach conditions. Lemon is very good for the stomach, the flu and low blood pressure. Pomegranate for vision. Aloe vera for as a heating pad for external lesions. And so there's just a few of the examples that he gives, but really great to have this traditional knowledge in place and to maintain it. And beyond that, we talked, we're moving more towards the offshoots of food, but I was really interested in veganism and later speciesism. Speciesism is the idea that there's a prejudice that treats certain animals with more dignity than others. So I'll give you a couple examples here. This is a move towards veganism. And this is found in Chicana Vegan, and it's an interview done by Susie Gonzalez, in which she interviews Rebel Mariposa, who owns a vegan restaurant in San Antonio. And, what's really interesting is this idea that Chicanismo and veganism can intersect. And that's what I think is so fascinating, is the intersectionality that's starting to happen as you progress through the exhibit, so that you're not only thinking about food and Latinx identity, but you're also bringing in sort of feminist approaches as well. So Rebel Mariposa writes, "For me personally, I wanted to recreate my family recipes. We have a family cookbook on my dad's side, and it brings me great joy to veganize those recipes, and it keeps me closer to my culture and roots. I was never motivated to cook meat, but when I went vegan, I began to cook all the time, and I reconnected with my tias and thought a lot more about my ancestors and the role of food." We have a couple other pieces here. Susie Gonzalez did for the first one, which is a person running alongside various species of animals. Typically animals, it looks like you'd find on an endangered species list on the whole. And the sign is speciesism is a feminist issue. And this appears in Vegan Feminist Perspectives. And I should say, you can click on these and get the metadata that I referenced at the introduction that my colleagues worked so hard to put in place. And can even click on the image again down here and get a close-up, a larger view. So please feel free when you're going through this to do that. But as I was saying, here you have a woman running in solidarity with various members of the animal kingdom. And I think that this statement at the bottom, which is also done by Susie Gonzalez, but appears in Chicana Vegan, helps elucidate the idea that she's going for in the previous, the more visual image. If we claim to be intersectional, yet disregard other species, then we reinforce the same systems of power that disregard us. For the final piece, I was really interested in thinking about legacies of colonialism that have led to ideals, in quotes, okay, about beauty. So like this supposed need to be skinny or white or blonde. And we need to debunk this, these myths, these colonial myths. And I think one way to do that, which is featured here, is through self-love. And so this is something Daisy Salinas wrote. It appears in the Muchacha fanzine, issue 9. What does body positivity mean to me? And so having, self-value, self-worth, having a positive self-esteem and well-being, loving yourself for who you are, these are topics that are popping up here. So, you know, and she said, when I hear the words body positivity, my mind can't help to automatically picture the Dove Real Beauty campaign that is supposedly promoting body diversity, despite the fact that all of the women's body types as a whole translate into an acceptable notion of normal. They aren't a size 2, so they appear to be promoting diversity compared to a typical fashion model, but they still have to maintain mass consumer appeal, so they are still under 200 pounds. Yeah, that's a great point. She backs it up again, also from Muchacha Fanzine number 9, with this great line: please don't let them profit off of your self-loathing with their distorted lies. Think about your ancestors, the ones that cried and bled and died so that we could survive and thrive. And I think, you know, that ties back to this Dove beauty campaign that she personally is talking about here. I think a lot of, you know, stuff like diet pills or skin bleaching creams. And again, like, finding that self-love and finding beauty in yourself helps you to steer clear of these unattainable ideals for people. And we finish with a very powerful piece by Sarah Maria Acosta Ahmad called Raíces. And this appears in the La Yerbera zine by La Liga. And just real quick, she writes, learning to love your body is a revolutionary act. It means loving the seeds that your ancestors planted that grew roots as long as your hair and as thick as your thighs. The same roots that intertwine with the ones of fellow comrades that together are stronger, growing up the sides of buildings that kept us out and tearing down bridges we were never meant to cross, but did. Yeah, a really powerful piece. Again, looking for solidarity, fellow comrades, resistance, looking towards your ancestors for guidance. And I'll just finish it off. This is the works cited page so that you can see where everybody's works are coming from, and hopefully, you know, read these on your own time when you have a chance. And I'll just let's see, bring myself back here for a moment and say, you know, I hope that you enjoyed seeing this digital zine exhibit, and I hope that it encourages you to come to the Benson once we reopen to check out the zines for yourself. And please keep checking back with Lilas Benson. I'm sure we're going to be keeping new content flowing, and you know, it was a really great joy for me to be able to do this. So thank you very much, and until next time.